Well, good afternoon, Rotarians.
Good afternoon, Kevin.
You're so wonderful. Wonderful. I'm so proud. I'm so proud of all of you. That was so good. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Des Moines meeting of October 10th. I'm Kevin Kassir. Thank you for allowing me to be your president. Kitty and President-elect Tim Littlewitz are in Memphis today, attending the large club conference, so that is a really cool opportunity. I'd like to thank Jordan for stepping up in Kitty's absence, and also Jamie Boersma. Thank you, Bob Vedrell. I understand you're stepping up as well, so appreciate y'all jumping in there with Kitty gone and making my job a little bit easier today. We appreciate Jackie Norris and Chris Anderson doing the greeting, so thank you, greeters. And Jackie is doing double duty today and will do the moment of inspiration, so she's being really efficient with your service. Thank you. She'll share her moment of inspiration, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, four-way test, and then we can have an opportunity to greet each other. So, Jackie.
Hello, everybody. Beautiful day. Who's excited? We are. All right. When I saw that Ann Selzer was to be our speaker today, I immediately knew my inspiration would be centered on the word integrity. Integrity is defined as the quality of being honest and showing a consistent and uncompromising adherence to strong moral ethical principles and values. In ethics, a person is said to possess the value of integrity if the person's actions are based upon an internally consistent framework and principles. Integrity is a fundamental component of character. Integrity can also be called honesty, decency, candor, goodness. As we reflect on this word integrity, I ask all of you to think about it as we repeat the four-way test and its connections to you and how you are living your life with integrity. So please join me in saying the four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And now the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, say hello to everybody. Say hello to everybody.
Hi, Jordan.
Good to see you.
Thanks for stepping up.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, here we go, David.
Hello again.
All right, thanks everyone. We have, excuse me, we have one guest today, familiar face. Dawn Roberts is a guest of Stu Tempero, and Dawn, as many of you know, is a former member of our club and the wife of longtime Rotary Club of Des Moines member Steve Roberts. So, Dawn. All right, on your tables is sign-up sheets for our Operation Warm Rotary Coat Drive that is driven by our community service Committee. It's the last day that you can sign up. The update on this is that we have, our goal, as I mentioned before, is 300 coats. We're up to 221. So we really have stepped it up, but this is the last week to do it. If you've already done it, think about adding another coat or two. If you haven't, please step up. As I said last time, going out to dinner, $100 doesn't go very far, but it buys 4 warm coats for some needy people, so needy kids. So please give that another look.
All right, sign up, everybody. $25 more is not gonna kill none of you, right?
Way to go, Bob. Okay, we're on to Did You Know, and I wanted to, in my list of Did You Know concepts, I thought, well, what would tie into Ann's presentation? So since we see all the political ads, I thought, let's talk about a little history of advertising. So, first of all, this is not a question, just a little tidbit. These days, this number is like crazy. These days, with all of the advertisements in social media, TV, radio, we're over 5,000 ads in one day for an American comes by you in some way, shape, or form. It's insane, it's crazy. Now going back into history, and here's our questions. When was the first TV advertisement? And if you know the background of it, you get extra bonus points for that, what it was or when. Anybody have an idea when that was?
1938.
You're close.
GE.
It was 1941. It was it was for a Brooklyn Dodgers game in New York, and it was for Bulova watches for $9. $9. So $9 in July of 1941. And now, what was the first toy ever advertised? And hint, it was one of my favorite toys as a little boy. Slinky's a really good guess, but it's in that ballpark, but not right. G.I. Joe, close again, but no. One more guess.
Frisbee.
Frisbee? No. It was Mr. Potato Head. How many had a Mr. Potato Head growing up? All right. And now we have Rotarians rolling on the floor laughing, and for that I bring up past President Doug Saltzgaber.
All right, keeping on the trend of politics here. Just seems like the political climate here is just, candidates can't make up their mind on an issue. They go back and forth. It's not like going back several decades when people would stick to what they believed in. Good example of that is found in a speech from a Mississippi legislator back in 1954. His name was Soggy Sweat II. I cannot make this up. My friends, I had not intended to discuss this controversial subject at this time. However, I want you to know that I do not shun controversy. On the contrary, I will take a stand on any issue at any time, regardless of how fraught with controversy it may be. You ask me how I feel about whiskey. All right, here's how I feel about whiskey. If you say the whiskey, you mean the devil's brew, the poison Scrooge, the bloody monster that defiles innocence, dethrones reasons, destroys the home, creates misery and poverty, yea, literally takes the bread from the mouths of little children. If you mean the evil drink that topples the Christian man and woman from the pinnacles of righteousness, gracious living into the bottomless pit of degradation and despair and shame, and helplessness and hopelessness, then certainly I am against it. But if when you say whiskey, you mean the oil of conversation, the philosophic wine, the ale that is consumed when good fellows get together, that puts a song in their hearts and laughter on their lips, and the warm glow of contentment in their eyes, if you mean Christmas cheer, if you mean the stimulating drink that puts the spring in the old gentleman's step on a frosty, crisp morning, if you mean the drink which enables a man to magnify his joy and his happiness and forget, if only for a little while, life's great tragedies and heartaches and sorrows. If you mean that drink, the sale of which pours into our treasuries untold millions of dollars, which are used to provide tender care for our little crippled children, our blind, our deaf, our dumb, our pitiful aged and infirmed, to build highways and hospitals and schools, then I am certainly for it. This is my stand. I will not retreat from it. I will not compromise. I approve this message.
Obviously, that's a future in politics. There you go. And now, to introduce our program, we have our program committee chair, who, by the way, is doing a fantastic job, and past president, David Busick.
Perhaps you've had this experience of being 3 days before Election Day and a new Iowa poll comes out, and you go, that can't possibly be right. How could that poll have moved so much since the last one? That's not my sense of the race at all. And then on Wednesday morning, I wake up and Ann was right again. Ann Selzer, J. Ann Selzer, is the president of Selzer and Company, best known for her public opinion research. The firm also specializes in research for clients who seek meaningful ways to communicate with their audiences, be they readers, viewers, voters, lawmakers, high-value bank customers, retail customers, corporate leaders, government officials, folks like you. Ms. Seltzer earned her doctorate at the University of Iowa in communication theory and research, and after a few years on staff at the Des Moines Register as the research director, she incorporated her research company, which began conducting the Iowa poll as a contractor in 1997. Ann Selzer has launched several major public opinion polls, including those for Bloomberg News, the Detroit Free Press, the Indianapolis Star, and most recently, a national poll for Grinnell College. Her track record for accuracy resulted in her winning only a handful of A+ ratings from Nate Silver's pollster ranking of over 350 polling firms on his 538.com website and now on the Silver Bulletin. Ann won a blue ribbon at the Iowa State Fair. You'll have to tell us about that. Although not born in this state, she considers herself a real Iowa. Please welcome to the Rotary stage, J. Ann Selzer.
Pardon me. Well, I get everything what I'm supposed to do. I'll just say, I think there are a couple of you in the room that I've not met before, so I feel very welcome here.
Yep.
Get this going.
Maybe point it here. There we go.
Just point.
Yeah, there.
Point it at the left. I would think it would be green. Is this okay with you?
I think it's okay, yeah.
You think it's
If
okay?
it's,
Okay. Well, we've started,
yeah,
haven't we?
yeah,
I guess it's
it's
working.
still-
Sorry,
it's still-
sorry for all of that. Nice to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. And Dave called me at a time or emailed me that I knew when we were going to be in the field next, and I wanted to be able to give you some insight inside the Iowa poll that people might not be able to figure out from reading the story about it, and some things that only I figure out on my own with my calculator. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. What's changed? We released a poll in September, so how did that change from what we released in June? How did that happen? What did not change, which is sometimes as interesting, and I'm gonna skip over the RFK Jr. part and the question and answer if you want me to go back there, I'm happy to. Anything that we gleaned about what's happening with Iowa elected officials, what about the congressional races here, and what will happen next? And fair warning, as I mentioned my calculator, there's a little bit of math. So, what changed since June? These two pie charts show a remarkable change in how the Iowa electorate is thinking about voting for president. It represents an 18-point victory for Donald Trump over Joe Biden in June, and that 18-point lead shrank to a 4-point lead in September. So if you're a pollster and you look at that kind of change, you think, wow, is it my numbers? Did something go wrong? This is going to be called an outlier and people will dismiss it. So I need to better figure out what exactly had happened. The first thing was that certainly there was a change, but there were underlying elements that explain it. And that is that the enthusiasm gap that Donald Trump, typically he's the king of enthusiasm. His supporters are sticky and they're lively and they embrace him wholeheartedly. But there's a little bit of an edge among those saying they're going to vote for Kamala Harris in terms of saying they're extremely enthusiastic or very enthusiastic. And even that she's leading at all in enthusiasm, that was a remarkable finding. We had also taken a look at how the electorate was feeling back in June, back when, you kind of remember June, what that was like when Biden was the head of the ticket. And you'll see that yellow line is the September polling. The optimism in the Iowa population had grown. The exhaustion number had abated only a tiny bit, but excitement had grown. Dread had dropped. The people saying, I dread the upcoming election. And then the rest of these, not too much change. But there's optimism and there's enthusiasm translated into excitement as well. So how is that possible? Because that's a big change. And one of the things that changed also was the proportion of our all Iowa poll representing the full population of Iowa who said they would definitely vote. There was a higher number in September than it had been in June. And 5 percentage points might not seem like that big a deal, and it might not be, except that the demographics of people more likely in September than they had been to say that they would definitely vote show a Democratic tilt. So women were more likely than men to say they would definitely vote in increased numbers. College degree, more likely than those without a college degree. Younger people, as opposed to, and it's really middle-aged people more likely. And non-voters or Biden supporters in 2020, more likely than Trump supporters. So there was a certain stasis in Trump support, and then a whole lot of dynamism in the Democratic vote between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. What did not change is that these numbers, even though Trump had been at 50 and then dropped to 47, it was not the basis, it's not true that Trump had lost ground. So this is where my calculator came out to see if I could work this out. And I want to refer to, I thought it might be clever in Iowa to talk about respondent equivalence. We have delegate equivalence, you might kind of understand that. It's respondents who have been weighted appropriately. And if you want to ask me about weighting in the Q&A, I'll go into that. Trump actually had more people in the September poll who said they would definitely vote and chose him than he did in June. Now, it was just 3 people, but he lost no ground in terms of the support in Iowa. However, Kamala Harris had an increase over what Joe Biden had gotten in delegate equivalence of 85. So if you do the math on that, the Trump number was a little under 1%. The Harris number, percentage points, the Harris number was 13 percentage points. You add those two together, you get the 14-point change. And that was my little aha moment, very excited at my calculator that I could prove it all out, that there'd been a change in the electorate which was responsible for a change in how the race is shaping up. Here's where I'm skipping the RFK stuff. So you might, that's the way the presidential election is shaping up, and we'll see what happens getting closer to the election. We also take a look in the same poll of all Iowans about what they're thinking about the elected officials. And I'll point you to the bottom first, that the lowest scoring elected official was Brenna Bird, the Attorney General. But you'll note, and do I have a little pointer on this?
Yeah, they're like in the center, I believe. There you go.
Okay, so 39% saying they approve of the job she's doing, but look, she's got 1 out of 3 who say, I can't tell you, I don't know enough to give you an answer. So keep that in mind. Second point here is that for Kim Reynolds, this is her lowest approval score since she took office as governor. So it's 50% disapproving. We call that underwater, that she has more disapproving than approving, and it's not because people don't know enough to offer a rating. So that was interesting. Our 2 senators are about the same. They're above water. They don't cross the 50% mark, so as they get ready for re-election, if they choose, that will be there. And then the best performing office holder is Rob Sand, the only statewide Democrat office holder. And you'll see he has the same not sure factor as Brenna Bird, but his approval marks are 4 times as high as his disapproval marks. And so we've measured him 3 times this year, and you'll see it's a pretty steady, I need more instructions about how to do this, or not do this, sorry. You'll see his numbers are pretty steady, that there's not been a lot of change. And then this is the governor since she took office. And you'll see that her approval ratings have been quite high sometimes. And then they've gone down a little bit, bounced around a little bit, but this is the first time that there's a cross where the yellow line signaling disapproval is higher. And you might wonder, well, how does that compare to other governors? I'm glad you asked. Because with our data, we can go back to pretty much the beginning of time. Well, not really. But we can go back to governors that were governing well before I was born, and that's a long time. But you'll see that Harold Hughes, Bob Ray, always high marks. Governor Ray was higher than 80% approval rating. Governor Branstad, in his first reign, bounced around a little bit. He had a time that he had a low mark. Governor Vilsack, Chuck Culver, didn't stay in office very long, and you could see he was down low just before he was ejected from office. And then Branstad's second reign, and Kim Reynolds, you'll see again that she's been above the yellow line of death, but now she's crossed it, so that's there. Why? Perhaps it is attitudes toward abortion, because there's been a big change in what's happened in this state over the last 2 years. And in September of 2008 was the first time in recent memory that we asked a question, do you think all abortions should be legal, most abortions legal, most abortions illegal, all abortions illegal? And you'll see that the mood of the state is especially lately in the last couple of years, marching upward on wanting abortion, all abortion or most abortions to be legal, to the extent it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio between those who want it mostly legal and those who want it mostly illegal. But what about more recently? So the 6-week ban, we asked about, do you favor that or oppose it? And the time we had asked it before, it was not yet in place. So the language was a little different. But you'll see that it's 59% who say they think they oppose the 6-week ban, and that's 5 percentage points up from when we asked it, in a slight variation from the last time. So it's something that the governor and her decisions about how she goes forward on this might be helpful to know where Iowans stand. Do we know, can I say anything about the congressional races? Not much. I want to remind you, our poll is 800 Iowans, and from that we extract those who say that they are likely voters. And that's under 700 of the 800. And now we want to divide them into congressional districts. Our base gets a little low. So in pollster talk, that would less stable. But we can look at it at a statewide basis, and you'll see that that more Iowan voters plan to vote for the Republican than the Democratic candidate in their district. It's 52-44. Now I'll share with you, without putting it on paper, although we did put it on paper in the register, that the 4th district, heavily Republican, it's a wider margin in the 4th district. The 1st district, our poll had the Democratic candidate leading. So there's a lot of activity you may be noticing around what's going on in that 1st district. There's thoughts that the 3rd district might be in play as well. We didn't see the Democrat leading in the 3rd district, which includes Des Moines there. But it gives you a little bit of a hint. Okay, so I get stopped on the street corner, I get stopped in the hallway, I get stopped at social events. What's going to happen? And what I typically say is, well, you know, I have a crystal ball collection, but I don't use it for work. And then I ask you to imagine, you know, what might happen next. And here's my short list of what has happened between our June poll and our September poll. So we had Trump found guilty by a jury on 34 counts in the hush money trial. Hunter Biden was convicted of 3 felonies. Trump and Biden debated on CNN. The Supreme Court ruled on presidential immunity. There was the first assassination attempt. But I had to say the first assassination attempt. And there were so many, I had to put it on 2 slides. So Biden withdrew from the nomination. He gave up his nomination and endorsed the vice president. RFK suspended his campaign and endorsed Trump. There was the Trump-Harris debate on ABC, a second assassination attempt, and early voting has already begun. And that's just domestically. And if you were to think about what's been happening on foreign land in that same few months, it's a lot of things. And in my long history of polling, any one of these things could be expected to change the course of the campaign. So when people say, well, what's your prediction? I said, well, please predict for me what's going to happen this week, later this week. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen this afternoon? Because things are happening at such a rate of change that what happens with this election, nobody with my integrity, thank you, Jackie, would say they know. Impossible to know, and we'll have a better idea with data closer to the time. I wanted to wrap up by talking to you a little bit about my method and what I give credit for my ability to have been accurate at times other pollsters have not. And what I think about other pollsters doing, and I think to their detriment, is what I call polling backward. That is, they will get a data set, and then they will use things to weight the data set that make the data look like they look like in past elections. So some of them are making things look like the 2020 exit polls in terms of the way the demographics go. Some of those are using recalled vote from 2020 to make their data set look like that. That's why I call it polling backward. And I call my approach polling forward. That is, I've created a method, and I'm not the only one who does it, but there are fewer and fewer of us, where I want my data, I want to take my best shot, that my data will reveal to me what this future electorate is going to look like. Because I don't believe the future electorate will look like the past electorate. So I say, keep your dirty fingers off your data, and the people who are polling backwards are putting their fingerprints all over their data and making assumptions about what this future is going to look like. And as I commonly say, if you're focused on the past, you miss the freight train that's coming right at you. And we have many examples of that happening. Our poll, that same method I just described, helped us catch the malaise that was very evident in the June poll, and it helped us catch the exuberance that was growing in the September poll. And I've been fortunate that my polls have been more accurate than not, and may it always be so. And I welcome your questions. Do I run this?
When's your next poll coming up?
When is our next poll coming up? So we typically don't say, but given that it's the middle of October, we will do one more, and it's just before the election. The reason we don't say is because campaigns would organize around our poll dates. And they would have announcements of endorsements, and they'd hold big events to try to influence, and the Register wanted no part of that. But everybody knows that we do a final poll, and the candidates have other things to worry about than our poll. Yes, sir.
How would you see the level of engagement among the electorate, those that can vote and so forth, nationally? Do you have any feel for that?
There are several data sources you can look to. If you look at who is registering to vote, there's a lot of activity in terms of getting people registered to vote. In Iowa, you have to be a little cautious because we have same-day registration. So you don't have to be registered, but there are states that if you haven't registered as of today, you can't vote. So, but that's one way to look at it. But I think state by state, there are a lot of different things going on, whether you have a Senate race, whether you've got a highly contested House race. There's a lot that's going on, so I'm vamping a little bit in case I come up with a metric that I think would answer your question directly. It would be hard to see an electorate more energized than 2020 in terms of turnout, because 2020 blew the roof off of turnout because it was COVID and everybody had a chance to get a ballot in the mail and turn it in, and there was a very high early voting, absentee voting rate. And whether we'll see that again this time, I don't know. Yes?
And thank you for being here today. Can you tell us how technology has changed
Yeah.
your
As little as possible. And the reason is if it works, it's hard to think about fixing it. So the people who've been early adopters of other sorts of technology, I have been ones that were sort of, their hand was forced, that what they were doing was going to be hard. So we obviously dealt with changes to, with cell phones, we obviously dealt with answering machines, texting. We basically do things about the same way we did when I was on the staff of the Des Moines Register, somewhere over here. So we call random digit phone numbers, both cell phone and landlines, and the first thing we say is we're calling from the Iowa poll. And our response rate is higher than the national average, and I give credit to the Iowa poll, and maybe just the word Iowa, that helps. But there are times with certain clients that we will do a text to let them know that this is coming, that they're going to get a phone call, or if they want to click here, we can send them to a web version. We don't do that for politics polling. Yeah, Ski.
And how many, to get your sample set of 800?
Yeah.
How many do you actually have to contact to get that 800?
Well, it depends on what you mean by contact. So we dial tens of thousands of numbers, if that helps. If by actually talk to them on the phone, then you know, maybe double what our number is. We'll know better in our final polls, because we interviewed all Iowans. In our final poll, we want 800 likely voters. So if you're not a likely voter, we're gonna ask you your age, your sex, we're gonna clarify what county you live in so we can do that. And then we're going to politely terminate you. And we use the demographic data to weight the data to look like all of Iowa, and then extract the likely voters. And we end up in those, with those contacts, to get 800 likely voters, 1,100 maybe. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, with today's politics being so polarized, do you get people who refuse to answer just because they don't want anybody to know what their political views are?
I'm sure there are. I'm not doing the dialing, so I don't happen to hear what that is. But I think it's obvious that would and could happen. Yes. And then
Sarah?
Oh, this one, Tish, then you.
Mine's, what do you think the betting markets on politics add to the conversation, if anything?
A chuckle. Tish?
What skills do you look for in your polling staff, and how do you maintain the level of integrity through that team?
Okay, so Seltzer and Company, I refer to as small but mighty. We do a lot of work. And our employee count, including me, is 2. And my assistant has been with me 20 years. So I've not had to look for that. But my nephew is currently interning at Gallup in Omaha. And so he's a senior at Nebraska in data science and economics. And having, being comfortable with math is certainly helpful, although my assistant was an English and religion major at Simpson College. But she's smart, so number 1, smart. Number 2, attention to detail, because it's a lot of numbers and we check everything. Nothing goes out that hasn't been checked.
Is there any particular demographic group that's hard to reach in your polling?
Well, sure. Younger people are harder to reach. Cell phones actually have helped us now that we can dial them, because younger people have their phone with them at all times. So we're able to connect with them more often. When we weight the data, we're going to weight down older people because they're more plentiful, and we're going to weight up younger people in order to look like a correct cross-section of the state. Yes?
I wanted to pick your brains a little bit on one of the poll questions that you had, and it's pretty evident by looking at the results that abortion seems to have played a big part in Kim Reynolds' opinion, possibly, right?
Possibly.
It seems like it points that way. But one of the questions you had perplexed me a little bit, where it said, are you in support of some or all abortions, right? So you have an absolute and a partial, and then the other one said, are you in support of some and all bans? So it seems to me like, should there not be a category in the middle, because that's
Let me give you the correct question wording.
Okay.
In fact, I'll look it up just to read it to you.
Great.
It's in here. It is a question about whether abortions should be, that all abortions should be legal. Most abortions should be legal. Most abortions should be illegal. All abortions should be illegal. So that's the question wording that's right there. So I don't think you had it quite right. And so I don't think there's a place in the middle on that. And we use that kind of technique a lot to sort of force people to one side or the other, because we want, if it's an uncomfortable thing, we want you to give it a moment of thought. Now, not 2 moments, because we've got to move on. Yeah. Yes?
And I'm happy that you're here because you and I met here at Broder.
You are correct, sir.
And so many conversations have come out of that, so thanks for coming in. Kevin, I was thinking about your trivia. The first political ad that ran on TV was in 1952 with Eisenhower and Stevenson. And think about how much that has garbled our brains since. But, and talk a little bit about the change in media. I mean, I don't think you necessarily collect your data differently, but you probably, in talking to media, have the questions the media asks, the way that you deal with media have changed, and how so?
Wow. I'm pickier about who I talk to, so that's changed. Because it used to be I'd consider myself press friendly. You want to talk to me, okay? I think I pretty much answer questions the same way I always have, which is it true? Was the question fair? I mean, those kinds of things they'll ask me about. And if they want me to be a pundit and say, why is this happening? I say, well, I will give you a data-driven answer, but I'm not here to spin numbers. And that's what a lot of them want. And as soon as I say, I'm just gonna speak for my data, you need to go talk to somebody else.
So you would say that's kind of the difference in the questions that you get is more trying to get you to
Yeah.
state an opinion
Yeah.
than it used to be?
Yeah, oh, yes, definitely,
Do
definitely.
they question your numbers more? Do you feel like you're under the gun to defend yourself more, or is that, you always have to defend yourself?
You know, I thought this poll was going to be laughed off the planet because it was such an amazing draw, and that didn't happen. And I think, you know, my tracker record is helpful. I'm trying to remember so I kind of mentally, and I should on paper, keep track of how people describe me, what adjective comes in front of my name. And so there's, you know, the gold standard, or the best pollster in politics, and maybe blah, 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 blah. And one said that the most beloved pollster, I kind of, wow. Wow. I did find that number. Which of the following comes closest to your opinion on abortion? And then the answers, as we talked about. So I hope that clarifies. Yes?
Could you talk about the variation that you use and what's acceptable in your mind as to whether or not it's a valid response or not? And when you see that variation, we see 1 to 3 years.
Do you mean margin of error?
Margin of error, I couldn't get it right.
That's okay, I'm glad you asked
Thank
that
you.
question.
Yeah.
So the margin of error is the margin of sampling error. That is, if we'd interviewed every Iowan instead of 800, how much would we expect the real answer to vary from what we're saying? And I believe, and I coach reporters, and they comply mostly, that the best estimate, and we're in the business of estimation, is the numbers in the poll, the numbers that we report. And so when people want to say, yeah, well, it's a 2-point race, that's within the margin of error, so it's tied. I come back to them and I say, that's an inferior estimate, and that the margin of error works both ways. So while you're right that it could be a tie, it is equally likely that the race could have a wider margin. And this is what kills the journalists. To say one, that it's a tie, and not say the other, is exposing bias. You must want the race to be close. Did that help?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you don't want to pull backward, you want to pull forward. So what are you using if you're not comparing data to who voted in 2020 or 2022? What are you using? That's my first question. My second question is, what was your blue ribbon for at the Iowa State?
So what I use are known population parameters, and our best source of that is the census. So for everybody I talk to, regardless of whether I'm only polling likely voters or not, for everybody, I'm gonna get your age, your sex, what county you live in. We played around with education, and in Iowa, we didn't find that to be helpful. So now I've got, let's say, 1,100 people that answered all of those questions. And I weight to the known population by that. And we've got clever little, we go at it very specifically and in depth. So men, women living in this county, so you have to be all three, so we can get you all. Because the proportion of male to female in the 4th district is not the same as it is in the 3rd. So we want all of this to be based properly. And then we get rid of the people who are not likely voters. So our data, as I showed you, will reflect when there's a larger number of women saying they will definitely vote. That shows up in my data. And the thing that really hardened my backbone on this were the 2008 Democratic caucuses, where we said not only would Barack Obama win easily, but the people coming to the Democratic caucus, 60% would be their first caucus. And if those of you who kind of remember this, it caused a flurry of concern in the Hillary Clinton and John Edwards campaigns, and they immediately issued memos saying she'll be fired tomorrow. Nobody would assume this. How could she possibly assume that it's more like 20% in past caucuses. How did she assume it would be 60%? And I was asked on the air with Judy Woodruff in the NewsHour, she said, how did you assume this? Why did you assume this? And I said, I assumed nothing. My data told me. And the entrance poll said it was 57%. So, I mean, that's a bonding moment with me and my method, which is what I want is to get out of the way of my data showing me. And I had a call from one of Hillary Clinton's state chairs saying, I've knocked on 99 doors and I haven't found this lurking Obama support. And I said, tell me about the 99 doors. Oh, well, people who went to caucus before and registered Democrats. Well, that's not what Obama was courting. And so they were focused on people who caucused before. They're focused on the past and they missed the freight train that was coming right at them.
I have one other question, sorry, before you answer the blue ribbon one.
Oh, yeah.
And that is, the legislature and the governor have changed the rules in terms of who is an active voter and who is an
Yes.
inactive voter. Is it possible you're polling people who are, well, if they're inactive, they can still vote, but maybe unregistered and not know it? Is it more likely now than in the past?
Well, you can, if you don't know you're not registered, you can register on election day. So that doesn't worry me so much. They're not throwing people off the list yet. So in our polling, it's only our caucus polling that we use the registered voter list, and it's been long enough now that we were fortunate in 2024 that nobody had been made inactive yet. But we've got to figure that out if there are future caucuses to be, because, yeah, I have words for our secretaries. You're making my life more difficult. Yeah, exactly. I won a blue ribbon for nothing you would really enjoy, for cheeseless roasted vegetable pizza. And the next year in your frozen food section, Wolfgang Puck produced, his people go to state fairs, produced, you can buy it today, a cheeseless roasted vegetable pizza. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann, very much for speaking to us today with your great work. We're proud of what you do, so thank you. Now, upcoming meetings. We have next week the retiring Chief of Police, Dana Wingard, and for those who have attended our Police and Firefighter Awards, he is an engaging speaker, so that will be fun. October 17th, hearing from our Chief of Police. October 24th, the CEO of Prairie Meadows, Gary Palmer. And then take note, on October 31st, we will not be here. We will be at the Boy Scouts Mid-Iowa Council on Scout Trail. And we will have Jamie Fitzgerald, Polk County Auditor, so staying on that politics and election theme. All right, now upcoming events. As a reminder, put on your calendars October 29th and November 12th. We have on the 29th, we will feature at our Fuel Coffee at Freedom Coffee. That's 9 to 10 at Freedom Blend Coffee. We will feature Matt Busick, who will tell his amazing life story. Yes, no relation to Dave Busick. And Tanya Wenzel, executive, and our own Tanya Wenzel, executive with EMC Insurance, will be November 12th. Come to those. Dick Stauffer, ask him in that table over there. Ask him, he's a regular. Let's see, Jet Miller and Brandon, you're pretty regular as well. There's others out there, Marty. It's a great time to just have a coffee with other Rotarians to start it off. And then we hear from some of our phenomenal Rotarians and get to know them in a much deeper way and be able to ask them questions. So check it out, October 29th and November 12th. So lastly, we need, I've just noticed that we've had a slowdown in prospective members coming to visit. So I'm gonna directly ask each one of you and challenge each one of you the next week. When you think about the accounting firms you use, or law firms you use, or your neighbor next door, or your friend at church, talk to them about Rotary. Do they know about Rotary? And if they don't, talk to them about our club. Tell them we have 170 tremendous leaders to be able to network and build relationships with. We've got great speakers that you can learn from and that you'll grow personally and professionally. And at the same time, we do great work in the community. How about that as a pitch? And I bet more people would be interested in coming to you to one of our meetings for a lunch and joining you. So that's the challenge this week, right? One or two, you know? And if we all do that, I bet you we pick up a few visitors over the next few weeks. So try it.
And it's fun.
And it's fun, right. So thank you again, Ann. Thank you for all of our assistants today. Thank you for making this a great club. We are adjourned.